Benny Furrer, welcome to the next generation.
Thank you.
We're moving into a world governed by AI where anything can be faked digitally.
Yes.
How does this affect justice?
Oh, that's a hugely broad, amazing question. 7 years ago, I wrote a published article about the coming deepfakes and how would we pursue it as a culture, as a society, because you can cause extensive harm to a business or an individual's reputation. AI, in the sense of how we could fake incidences, embarrass, humiliate, or defame somebody, is going to be a huge issue. It's going to be huge. But the flip side of AI is it's a wonderful tool. It's amazing. And in terms of helping us as government doing certain acts, it'd be incredibly impactful towards a lot of our work. That's the truth. So it's a very complex question what you're asking.
I think one of the key elements here at play is trust. Trust in institutions, trust in individuals, and trust in the information that you're being presented. And I like to think of it as these three waves of the internet, where first it was brand new and you couldn't trust it because it was this new thing, right? You had all this wisdom from books. So people tell you, don't believe everything that you see on Google. Then you get into this second wave that we're kind of transitioning from now, where you take the first Google search as gospel or the first video on Twitter that you see as being true. But we're transitioning away from that because we're all becoming aware of these AI fakes and deep fakes like you're speaking about that have come through. So the third stage is looping back, and it's the same as the first one.
Right.
But it's not because the internet's underdeveloped and new, it's because it's had time to progress and the technology is so much more powerful that you can't trust anything again because there could be an AI video of you robbing a bank. And it's clearly you doing that. There's proof. So how is that going to affect our society going forwards?
Well, I mean, I think the point is everything's cyclical in a way. Like, I started using AI extensively at work in both my jobs. I'm a district attorney and a professor, and I started using AI and realizing the value of the tool if used properly. And there's a lot of people, old schools, professors or old school district attorneys, like, no, this is terrible. And I was like, well, you can be Luddites, right? You can fight the evolution of technology, but you can be left behind. So we'll always go through that evolution in every stage of new technologies. And so this is just another stage. I always tell my students, like, when the iPhone came out, it blew my freaking mind. Like, truly blew my mind. I never envisioned something like this. I was that guy, right? Like, and so I remember my friend I was a district attorney already at the time it came out, and my close friend had a Apple One or whatever it was. And I was like, you just touch the screen? Like, and stuff moves? Like, there's no joystick? There's no keypad? And it blows your mind. You're like, well, wow, this is crazy. I can't deal with it. I think this is the next major technological breakthrough. We're going to have to learn to adapt and learn how to use it. So yes, we have an increase in video, in body cameras, in imagery that we can help solve crime. Certainly this will give us a step back for a minute the moments people start claiming that the evidence is not accurate, it's not real, and there's place to say that, but we'll adjust. I have no doubt about that. I'm not intelligent enough to know where, but I think we will. We'll figure out those methodologies of where we can figure out the fakeness of a piece of evidence or not. But in terms of like using AI for problem solving, for predictive modeling, things like that, again, we can discuss the efficacy of it or the value of it. But well, not the value. I think the value is going to be immense. Like, it's going to be immense. It's going to be our world, our universe is going to be changing in the next 10 years immensely because of AI. And I think overwhelmingly positive. But like everything else, there's an incredible negative. I as a prosecutor prosecutes cybercrime. And part of cybercrime is online sex abuse, right? We can criticize the internet for the proliferation of incredible amounts of harmful data, but we would all agree that the internet is the most incredible thing in humankind, right? So I think it's unbelievable. It's obviously used for negative and used for criminality, but the overwhelmingness. So same thing with AI. I think that's some people are taking a very very cautious approach, or and I think that's nice, but you're not stopping the freight train. So let's embrace and let's figure out the methods. So we'll see. I don't know yet.
Well, talk to me more about this tango that's going on between the progression of surveillance and body cams versus the limitations, knowing that these can now be faked as footage. What are you actually dealing with on the ground as a DA?
So in actuality, we're not. That's the truth. It always takes time for the criminals to do their thing and then for us to catch up to us. I always say law is very reactive and responsive to incidents that occur. It's not proactive. Hence my like I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, my article on deep fakes. I saw it coming for whatever reasons. Side note, I was tipped off by the Secret Service about the issue of deep fakes. Secret Service came to me and asked me to look into it because movie studios were concerned. So when it comes to finance, they were concerned that someone's going to derail a release of a movie. We're here in LA. Someone produces a deep fake of their major star doing something really bad. So this is going back 7 years. They came to me and said, hey, Benny, would you look into this? And that's why I started looking into it. So it wasn't my brilliance in being on top of the game. But the idea is right, it came to me and I was like, wow, that's a real issue. And then I discovered there's no law about deep fakes. And our legislature, California legislature, was not interested in producing a law. I tried to write legislation. They said no. So the question is, could we deal with it as from a prosecutorial perspective? Using other laws to achieve the same goal. So the same thing with like AI. I'm not seeing AI on the ground yet in terms of like deep faking a body cam, because I do think we have a traceable methodology to that. So that's what, like me say, there's an officer who will ultimately authenticate that this is the body cam that observed what they physically observed, and that, like anything, could be true or not true, but they subject to cross-examination, stuff like that. The issue we're seeing in AI is AI modeling on, an easy example, AI models of child pornography. How are we going to deal with that, where people have AI-generated contraband? And is that legal or illegal? Whatever. California did pass a law pertaining to that, but I'm testing it right now as we speak. I have an AI case where we caught a guy with numerous videos of computer-generated child pornography, adult men raping children, but they're not real, right? It's not a real victim. It's not a real human being. It's an AI-generated model. How do we deal with that? And so I'm trying to file a test case to see how our courts are going to deal with that actually as we speak.
Well, nerd out about this with me and please go into full depth. I can imagine that there's one argument where you could potentially go, why don't we allow this? Because it's not real and it's letting these people live out their sick fantasies without harming an actual person. And then there's where I land, which is intuitively going, but this is still fucked up and we don't want to encourage this. This should be illegal, surely, just based on knee-jerk reaction here.
So let's nerd out about it. So years ago, under the George W. Bush administration, and Donald Rumsfeld was the Attorney General, we tried to create an AI law. Or the feds did. They tried to create an AI law saying possession of AI-generated child pornography is illegal. And it was struck down by the Supreme Court of the United States. The idea behind it was like this. Look, we have a First Amendment that allows us to speak and engage in any way. The only time we can prohibit the First Amendment, that is, prevent someone from speaking or engaging in action, is we have to have basically what we might call a compelling government interest. So any piece of child pornography, real child pornography, necessarily involves the actual harm to a child. And what you're viewing is crime scene evidence, right? We might call it. So in that case, the compelling interest in prohibiting possession of child pornography is the preventing of a child being harmed. Now, the person might say, well, I didn't harm the child, someone else did. I'm just viewing that. And you're like, well, there's a compelling interest in not being prevented from being used or passed around. When it came to AI, the Supreme Court said, well, there's no interest. No child's being harmed. Right? So you're right. There's no interest. Now, fast forward 25 years later, we're looking at this and seeing actual computer-generated imagery happening, and we're trying to figure out how do we deal with that. We also have, side note, again, to totally nerd out, we have obscenity statutes. The Supreme Court has never held that obscenity is protected by the First Amendment. Okay, so pornography is protected by the First Amendment. Engaging whatever weird-ass behavior you want to engage in is protected, but obscenity is not. What's obscenity? That's a question, right? Obscenity is, they've defined as something that has no social value at all, and doesn't appeal to any purient interests of human beings. And that's kind of like a loose terminology of it. So we've created AI-generated child pornography laws under the guise of obscenity. We're going to call it obscenity because AI-generated porn in and of itself might not be. The bigger issue is if I'll give you an example. Many years ago, someone tipped me off about, and I actually have a screenshot somewhere on my computer of this, which was someone tipped me off that on Amazon, they were selling child sex dolls. And I actually found it, and I took a screenshot of it, and it was like 7-year-old girl sex doll. Is that wrong? Well, Amazon pulled it down. The moment they got notified of it, obviously they pulled down. It's not in their business interest to have that being sold, but is that wrong? Can I possess that? And the answer is probably yes, unfortunately, right? Like your first statement was. The same thing with like child pornography. If I create a computer-generated image in my own home, and I'm using it for my own sick fantasies, I guess it's protected. You can engage in whatever you want to do in your home. Again, as long as no one's being harmed, no physical human being is being harmed, the government don't have interest. The question is if I distribute it. Now, all of a sudden, a secondary person's being affected by that. I don't want to say harmed or not. Once I'm distributing, I'm creating a marketplace for this stuff, and therefore we might call obscenity. So that's kind of where we're going with it, to be technical with the whole thing. We're kind of going down these obscenity statutes and saying, well, you can't share it. The government can prohibit people from sharing, but possessing itself, you can do whatever weird shit you want to do. So that's kind of where it is. So you're right. There is an instinct to say, live out your sick fantasy and don't harm a child. And that is a certain instinct. And this is now anecdotal, not legal, but anecdotally, having been in a DA for 20 years and dealing with a lot of this sort of stuff, the proliferation of sick fantasy to reality has increasing with the access to the internet. So I always try to talk about this idea of like in the early days of criminality, if a person wanted access to this sort of contraband, it was hard to get. You had to know some creep who knew some creep who can get you a magazine. Nowadays, you just go online. It's there. It's on Instagram. It's on Twitter. It's traded on Kik and Snapchat. I've got cases from all those places. And in a way, I think, again, not a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, but I think anecdotally that the access to could trigger interest in. So beforehand, it wasn't an access. It was a dormant sort of vice that you might have had that you weren't aware of. And now that we have the internet, we're seeing like our child pornography prosecutions have increased exponentially since, the 90s to today. And that obviously makes sense because it's being traded. But like, I don't truly believe there were that many people viewing child pornography in 1990 as they are today. Right. So that's a problem, right? The internet's giving access to that and maybe triggering a dormant interest in something and creating this fantasy or whatever it is. So that's a problem. And now we're just trying to track this information, and it's overwhelming. If you want me to get in a little detail on that we can go nuts on that. But it is. Am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Absolutely.
It's fucking bananas how many people have watched child pornography. It's insanity. It's terrifying.
How are they accessing that?
It's everywhere. So you have multiple different sites that exist in different ways, or methods of trading or terminology that's being used. And so you might have we have like millions and millions of what we call known images. That is images that we already know who the child is. They've been tracked down. We have this international organization that operates and keeps track of every single thing. And so we know who they are. And then there's a lot of groups like clubs, like a little while ago, federal government shut down a child pornography site that in order to access the child pornography on the site, you had to produce your own. That was your in, right? It's like snorting a line of cocaine so you can buy the coke, right? It's sort of like that, right? Like they had to submit their own new imagery that was vetted by the administrators of this dark website. And then you then, knowing that you're a predator yourself, you had access to their predatory stuff.
You have to incriminate yourself to
Correct.
Get into the criminal circles.
And then you can get access to all this other people self-creating child pornography. So there's that. But we're seeing there's a method to track a lot of the known child pornography online, and we are tracking a lot of it. We can see it live. Like there's live trading of child pornography, and it's just it's overwhelming. We don't have enough human beings in the world to prosecute the cases. So every so often we do just like it's like sampling a bottle of Pepsi that just came out of the factory. We take one, right, to hopefully discourage the rest of them. Right, we test one, so we might go in and just do different operations every so often and just grab whatever we can, and then hopefully it scares more people.
Well, I want us to talk more about how prominent these videos are online. And it's shocking. You see a platform like Pornhub taking down 9 million out of the 12 million videos they have on their website.
I didn't know that 9 million of 12 million. Is that true? Is that true number? Was contraband?
They didn't know.
I knew they took
confirmed.
down some. I didn't know it was that many.
They didn't know confirmed,
Right.
but they didn't have proof that it wasn't.
Wow.
Bad. But for now, I want to follow this breadcrumb trail of leaping from you being able to do whatever you want with AI when you're by yourself, but potentially being able to incriminate someone that's then imposing it on others. It kind of doesn't check out logically. Someone's not committing a crime when it's for themselves, and then suddenly it is a crime imposing this non-criminal thing on someone else. And there's a deeper question there to be had about why it actually matters that these images are AI versus real and human. And I think this is the big question that we're going to have to unpack as humans with AI emerging is what on earth actually gives us our human rights and what makes us different to these robots?
Oh, that's an incredible question. I mean, we from an American perspective, right? We look at the Bill of Rights and the Constitution as not something that the government has given us a right to exist. It's something that is inalienable to us. That is, it is natural to any human society and it should exist and no one should be able to take it away from you. So it's not the government saying you have the right to free speech. It's us. We do factually have the right to free speech. You can only limit it in unique circumstances. And so that's where the beginning of this sort of idea that we're talking about comes from is like, yes, I have an inalienable right to wear a Nazi uniform, right? Like, I mean, just whatever it is, like I do have a right to do that. I have a right to engage or have whatever belief system I want. The question is what does the government have a right to suppress that or not? When it comes to you as an individual, it's less important than when it comes to the secondary individual, which is the government then may have an obligation to protect its citizens from you. And therefore that's where it might step in. But as far as you as an individual, you have like with very little limitation, you have rights to just exist in any manner and form you want to exist in. Right. So that is kind of the idea of the First Amendment is I have the right to think and act for myself. The question is when you're impacting others. And now all of a sudden the government can step in because ultimately, in my opinion, the most basic role of government is to protect society. You from yourself or society from you. So that's where government's role is. But me to the exclusion of government, they have no right to step in as a general rule. If that makes sense.
So I guess it's not really people trying to falsify crimes and incriminate others that aren't criminals. It's criminals who are perpetuating their own crimes and indulging in more excess now that they can fake certain fantasies. Do you see that going forward as being the main use of AI? Or do you think we will spill into me wanting to screw you over because I want to take your job position and incriminating you for something you didn't do?
In my opinion, the advancement of technology is often pushed by by perverse interests. I don't mean perverse in like you're disgusting. I mean just non-traditional interests. So for example, before I went to law school, I worked for WorldCom, an international internet company. At the time, lost a ton of money. Anyway, and the best sellers, this is in the 90s, the late 90s, early 2000s, the salespeople, I was a salesperson selling internet access for massive companies. And it was a lucrative job, but the people who made the most money were people selling internet to porn companies. Porn companies, if you can get a web hosting of a porn site, you were doing amazing as a businessman, as a salesperson. Unfortunately, that pushes a lot of technology. A lot of things happen. Like you look at like Napster. Do you know like BitTorrent, Napster, those sort of peer-to-peer networking? It was early on. It starts off, oh, this is a great way to share my music, right? With one another. Oh, I like this album. I like this artist. I want to listen to their songs, and quickly devolves and degenerates into pornography, and which quickly devolves into the child pornography arena. And then that pushes regulation on things. I think that the early days of the internet, or websites, World Wide Web was just people just trying to make some little impact of their own on society, create something. But then it's sort of clarifies, and ultimately the financially motivated criminal gets involved. So online pranks or hacks, the early hacks of internet or of whatever it was, were more prank than financially motivated. Today, they're totally financially motivated with some prank, right? With some like white hat hacker groups, let's say Anonymous. We've heard of Anonymous, but they're the exclusion. The majority is. So the same thing is like this. I think that we're in the early stages of this AI and the negative use of AI. I think we'll start off with pornography. I think it will devolve into real capability of creating financial incentive for people. So yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. And I think it will go down that path. And that's when real regulation will start happening.
What do you think to these vigilante groups like Anonymous taking justice into their own hands?
It's complex. I teach Anonymous in one of my classes. I mean, it's very complex. Like many radical groups that may have started off, I'm going to be controversial for 5 seconds, like the Black Panthers, for example, right? We've all heard of the Black Panthers. We've romanticized the Black Panthers. In the early days of the Black Panthers, it's hard to argue with their platform, agenda, and perspective. We can discuss whether I agree or disagree with what their attitude was, but it's an admirable place to start. That is to protect African-American people from police brutality. Why not? That's great. That's wonderful. If you could, that's an amazing idea. But when you devolve into committing actual murder and bombings and engaging, that's the thing with some of these organizations. Anonymous is theoretically great. But when you take into account your own moral value system without a checks and balances, without a value system in place, without a leadership sort of perspective, then you inevitably get perverted in the perspective that you might be engaging in. So I hope they do good work, but you're basing it solely on the morals of some anonymous or group of anonymous individuals who you don't know their value systems. Right? Even at the worst case scenario, we know government's value system and we vote on it. We might disagree with it, right? We might abhor it. We might dislike it. But if you live in a democracy, we know who our government is at the very least, and we can change opinions.
It's all very muddy.
Yeah.
And especially what fascinates me is this intersection between law, justice, our morality, which perhaps we can speak about is derived from something like Judeo-Christian values more than we think it is. And when it is acceptable to take matters into your own hands if you don't feel that the government's doing a good enough job of upholding those inalienable rights that you are meant to have.
Oh, that's such a tough question because it discusses an idea of right? You're discussing philosophical ideas of where morality lies in the passage of law. And it presumes morality in law enforcement in their desire to pass law for the benefit of society. And it presumes many things. Generally speaking, many years ago, early years of teaching, a student said to me, along the lines of, he said, China will never surpass the United States. He was a Chinese national student. And I was like, well, why? Like they have so much more production than us, so many more people. And he said, because we're a country of law. They're not. And he says the moment when you have law that regulates and organizes and people follow, then you have a system that works. The other system could have highs and lows, but it will constantly devolve. And there's no incentives for certain things. Creative incentives don't exist if you don't protect creativity. Right? So patent, copyright, trademark, etc. laws that we might have, then they don't have or don't have as robust as us, or don't really care about it. People quickly lose incentive if they don't have an incentive to create. It's an interesting concept. I don't know that. That's not my area of expertise, but what I do know is so long as we recognize the general value of laws, that they are good and intended for our betterment, and we follow those laws. And to the extent we disagree with law, we elect legislators who will change that or fix it, then we're running in a good place. The moment we start to devalue government entirely and start totally distrusting government or totally distrusting laws, then all of a sudden you're in a place where there's chaos reigns and we don't know what is or what isn't. Right? So, for example, some of these groups, again, to get totally, completely, utterly controversial, some of those groups that talk about like tearing down the criminal justice system, we need to start over. And my question for them when they bring that up to me, as students, wherever, I go, okay, so starting with what? Like, Yeah, okay, you think the system's broken and bad, and that's fantastic. Let's fix it. Where are you starting? Tell me. Thou shalt not kill? Do we agree with that one? So we're going to keep that one on the books? Don't steal. Okay, we're going to keep that one on the books. Don't kidnap. We should keep that. The 10 Commandments, that's where we're starting. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's the point. Is like, what exactly are you talking about? And when you want to just tear down, then you don't have a structure in place. And that's my general concern when we talk about like law and morality. Our value system is derived from history and from the value system that the country was created on and the perspectives that were there. We have, even though we're westernized democracies, England, Australia, and the United States have varying values within the same range, but we have very varying values. We don't appreciate the British colonialist sort of countries, Canada, the Commonwealth. They don't appreciate the First Amendment like the Americans do. It's almost like they consider it a grant of government, whereas we consider it's inalienable and the government can't take it away. We're looking at it from a totally different perspective. We're looking at it from the individual. You're looking at it from the government. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, in that sense. But even with all those differing values, we're going to come up with certain types of moralistic-based perspectives on crime and justice.
Sat here at this podcast table in 2025, do you think that our laws are more downstream from morality, or that our morality is more downstream from our laws?
I don't understand the question. What do you mean downstream?
Do the laws that we impose through government and potentially small circles at the top deciding how we should govern,
right,
affect our moral, more personal understandings of the world? Or is it that our personal agreed upon morals have more weight than we would think on the laws that we have decided?
I see the point. It's very hard to decide. I think historically, the westernized philosophy and value system came from a Judeo-Christian values. Like the Bible does say don't kill, but I think most human societies figured that out on their own, right? We'd call that just a rational law. It's not a religious-based law. We understand that as a value system. But there are laws within that morality, moral value system that do come down to us. I don't know. Let's just say don't torture an animal, right? Why not? I mean, why not? Right? Like it doesn't have feelings. It's not a human being, and it doesn't have feelings the same way. People can make that argument. But we would understand that in our society, that's abhorrent. We have animal cruelty laws, right? Like if someone's torturing a dog, you're like, what? We would be furious and rightfully so. How dare you? But someone may argue that's a moralistic law, right? Comes from a moral value system. In other cultures, they might not appreciate that in the same way. So is that colored by biblical texts that say don't torture animals? Right? Well, it's hard to trace any number of things, but we do know that we colored our environmental society, one nation under God, right? That sort of idea that exists with a certain moral value system that may evolve and change, but that is the basis of Americanism. Or westernized ideologies may be the basis of those moral value systems that we've seen in the Judeo-Christian system, or I would say Islamic as well, in those sort of systems of how we should treat humanity, or each other, or animals, or property, or all those things. So there is certainly definitely a moralistic value system that we exist, or we have in our society. One of the first things I teach is about privacy law, and I talk about privacy law in the context of the Bible. Like what the Bible didn't have technology, but did they understand the idea of privacy? And there is multiple instances across the Bible which shows perspectives and appreciation for individual privacy, for cultural privacy, for physical engagement. So there's many different aspects where the Bible talks about those sort of things, and that extends to the New Testament and the Quran as well, and even Greek history and Roman history has systems like that as well, but I think they're derived from the same.
We're now in a digital world. We're in the information age.
Sorry, that was a total ramble. I don't know what the hell I just said.
That wasn't a ramble at all. This is great.
We're in the digital age. Yeah, go.
We're in the digital age, and I would argue that social media governs reality more than reality governing social media at this point.
Yeah.
People before in the past have been very strongly advocating the death penalty, and I know it's still in place in some states in America now. What do you think to the concept of something like a digital death penalty? where you've committed crimes online or you've used the internet irresponsibly, and you're not going to be put to death physically in corporeal form, but for life, you get this ban from the internet where you're not trusted to use it.
Several questions for that. It's a fascinating idea. How do you enforce that?
I suppose it would take even more tracking of people's use of technology, and to buy a phone, you'd have to bring your passport or your ID card.
So let's back up. It's the removal of privacy of the individual. Right? That's what it is. It's saying you're not going to have privacy anymore because in order to, right? Implementation is very difficult. That could be certainly a negative and a very impactfully negative attitude. However, putting aside those crimes, like I think people in jail have an internet ban, right? So, you know what I'm saying? It's like if you're spending life in prison for a murder, you have an internet ban. But what if you view child pornography? Do you deserve to be impacted by that action for the rest of your life? That's the bigger question, right?
Yeah.
How do we look at crime and punishment? And should you be punished for yourself? Certainly, I will tell you that part of our agreements when people are released on bail or people plead guilty, we have prohibitions on their use of internet in certain ways. We can't totally prohibit it. You have a First Amendment right to engage with another member of society in a legal manner to conduct business or things like that. So you're taking away certain basic rights. When we talk about that, right? My First Amendment right to speech, my First Amendment right to press, my First Amendment right to assembly, you're taking that away. And for a lifetime impact, that's number one. And then number two is how far do we impact somebody? Like, in my opinion, yeah, I would like child pornography, possession of child pornography to be a life in prison. But practically, that's not a practical result, right? I understand the legislatures aren't going to do that. In California, possession of child pornography is a maximum of 3 years. Maximum. So should he be impacted for life? 20-year-old looks at child pornography, has 10 images on their phone. We prosecute them. Let's presume they get the maximum 3 years in prison, which never happens. But let's say, so for the next 80 years of their life, they should have no internet access? Is that fair? Is that justice?
I guess what interests me is taking the internet from this tool, and it seems that you would be closer to the side of actually almost bringing it into this inalienable right.
It is.
How so?
Well, because it's not just because anything that exists in society is inalienable that the government shouldn't be able to take away from us. I can walk down a street. The government shouldn't be able to prevent me. Are there times and places and look, can I have a restraining order against somebody prohibit? Sure. But there's time and space. I can't say you're prohibited from walking down the street. Anything that's created in society is society's use. The government can only restrict it to the extent they have an interest in restricting it. You don't have a right to sit there and say, you can't use the internet to talk to your mother. Why? What's it your business, government? So yes, every platform is a creation of a place where I can speak, right? The First Amendment says in our right, and the way we look at it as Americans is we have a right to get, the government shall not create any laws infringing the freedom of religion, the establishment of religion, the freedom to practice, the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press. We have a right. And the internet's just another platform, another variation of speech. And so, yes, if I want to have an assembly, right, the Constitution says we have the right to freely assemble. If I want an assembly, it doesn't have to be physical. It can be virtual. I have a group of people, we believe in the devil, and we want to have a meeting online and talk about our belief. Why not?
Yeah.
So, yes, government preventing you from accessing is certainly infringing on your ability to speak.
I suppose it's difficult because you could do some sort of digital restraining order. But the point is that the people were accessing these sites that are already illegal.
So to interrupt you for a second is that we do this sometimes. Feds are much better at this, but we can place tracking softwares on your various electronic devices that prohibit you from going certain places.
What if someone just buys a new iPhone?
Correct. I mean, say, you're right. There's limitations to any sort of oversight of anybody. Just like we can put someone on probation or parole for committing a crime, they can still go out and commit a crime separately where we don't know about it. But the point is that we'll place hindrances on you to prevent you from whatever it is, right? And there's various legal methodology. Like, for example, when people are on probation or parole in our system, they have to give up any rights they have in terms of search and seizure. So a parole officer, a probation officer can go into this criminal's house, search their devices, and if you find contraband, they'll be put in prison immediately, like that. So we do have that ability to check on it in a way, and we and maybe there's greater or lesser oversight that we have to figure out, but we do have that sort of ability. But human beings are human beings; they can bypass anything at any time, right? There's only so much we can do as government. We balance regulation with freedom, right? And we don't want over-regulation.
Yeah, and I guess it's so hard to put a digital ankle tag on someone, because an ankle tag, you can't just cut off your leg and buy a new one, whereas you can buy a new phone.
But you could cut off your ankle monitor. People do.
And you have to make stronger ankle tags.
I'm just saying, like, you see, I'm saying that people do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's various ways we can figure out, like, give you an example, like we do a lot of, in Los Angeles, we do wiretaps. We're tapping your phones. We're listening into major drug dealing organizations. Those organizations are billion-dollar businesses. They're smarter than us. They have more money than us. How do we keep tracking them? Right? If I'm a smart drug dealer, I'm using a burner phone every single few hours. How's the government going to keep a wiretap? Well, we have methods. I'll give you one method, little tip. Criminals tend to call their mom a lot. If I know your mom's phone number and I see a new phone number coming in, I know your new phone number. Your girlfriend, your mom, somebody, right? So let's just say you're working on a burner phone and I know that you call your mom. So I have your mom's number. The moment I see a new number coming in, I know that's the new number for the burner phone. An easy life example.
Where'd you go from there with that information?
Then I'll immediately get the wiretap onto the new phone. I'll switch it over within minutes. Because I'm working with the phone companies at this time, I can just switch it over. So you call your mom every day, or a lot of criminals call their girlfriend, their mom, whatever, their sister, who cares? So some close relative, and I have their information, and I'm tapping their phones for the sake of getting your number. Then the moment I see a new random number coming in that's answered, right? Then I know, well, that's a good chance that's that new phone number. I mean, we can look at certain statistics, like depending on the length of the call, decide, like we all now ignore unknown numbers on our phones, right? I do. Most people do. If the phone's answered and you're talking for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, it's probably not a solicitor, right? So then there's a good likelihood that's your phone number. Now I know your new phone number. Now I can switch the tap to that phone number, listen in. Oh, it's the right guy. Oh, it's the wrong thing. Cut it off. But that's an easy, low-level method. There's a lot of other methods.
What are the other methods?
I don't know. No, there's a lot I don't know. I will tell you. There's a lot I don't know, nor could say. But there's experienced professional wiretap people who know how to do this.
Something I've been talking about a lot over the last few years to friends and just being unable to pin down is the fact that the internet, it's a very easy place to spread hate on. And I don't mean this in a virtue signally, words of violence type way. It just is easier. There's less friction, and importantly, there are less consequences, right? If I say something about your mother to your face now, although we are granted sitting at a big table, you may still lean over it and punch me in the face.
Right.
Whereas online, I have the key thing of anonymity to hide behind. So with that comes more controversy, more people rage baiting and engaging in activities that ultimately, in my opinion, take society in the wrong direction, take us away from flourishing. How do we solve that?
Oh, that's so good. I love this question. Continue, yeah.
Potential thing here is ID. To sign up to Twitter, you need to verify your ID, and your username is unique. It's your full name followed by your birthday or whatever. Now, am I pitching that as an idea? Obviously not, because there are loads of problems with having to have ID given to any social media platform. So I want you to help me out here. How do we limit this detachment from morality, this anonymity that protects people and protects trolls, whilst also not infringing on our freedom and our rights?
So let's get something out first clear, is that I do believe anonymity is a fundamental right? Like just going, I have the right to choose to be anonymous. However, so let's back up for a second. People get a lot of worried about this, and I really love this because I love history. I'm a real fan of history. So in the early days of the printing press, for example, let's even go further back. You know the Crusades at all?
Yeah.
During the Crusade period, there were various absolute lunatics that people marched behind with a banner with the purposes of slaughtering non-believers. It's a famous story. There was a woman with a chicken. They followed the chicken. Where the chicken went, this woman could divine through the chicken, and the Crusaders went with her. She had a troop of military people going around following a fucking chicken. Okay. That's crazy, right? But during that era that we had, see, this is not a new problem we've had. This is a problem that has existed for all society. It's just we have a different amplified form of this. During an era, people with incredible, perhaps mental illness or sociopathy or manipulativeness have been leading humanity all over the place. And tragedies and brutalities occur, but we tend to be good at figuring that out sooner or later. And so that does happen. And so that's not a new phenomenon that has been going on. That is a phenomenon as old as humanity has ever existed, that we have followed charlatans and cheaters and fakers and that sort of thing. If you read about the Anabaptists in Germany and the taking over of towns, it's phenomenal stories of actually insane, bipolar, mentally ill human beings leading masses of humanity. Okay. The early days, jumping ahead, right? The early days of Munster, I think I'm just going back to the last story. Munster, I think it was a city taken over by the Anabaptists. And the leader of the Munster, it was a walled city, and they were surrounded by the Catholic Guard, military, bishop, and cardinals. And they were just total lunatics and slaughtered people and did crazy stuff. But like one of the great stories is like the leader of I forget his name, the leader of this town, he has a vision one day. He says, listen, Abraham in the Bible, he fought the kings and to save his nephew Lot. I don't know if you're familiar with that story.
No.
It's a story. Lot, the nephew of Abraham, gets kidnapped by a bunch of kings and armies, and Abraham goes out by himself and he destroys them by himself. Okay, that's a biblical story with his servant, right? And this guy goes, I had this dream that I'm like Abraham. I'm going to destroy all these forces, these military forces camped outside our city, me and 10 men. And they're like, you sure about this? He's like, yeah. And he rides out with his 10 men, like just full force gallop towards these soldiers. And everybody's looking up, are you kidding me right now? And he just rides out and they shoot a bunch of arrows and he's dead. And that's it. Like the guy just dies. And like he really had a belief. He was mentally ill. He's not a normal, like he really believed he was like Abraham. He's going to destroy these armies, and they just shot him down. And then the next guy got up and was like, he misinterpreted the dream. I got it right. I'm saying we have this problem. Okay. Fast forward to the early 1900s, late 1800s, the printing press starts happening. Everybody's got a newspaper. Everybody has the capability of speaking. Despicable journalism is occurring in the late 1800s, early 1900s. The spread of gossip and destruction of people's reputation was going on all over the place. And then eventually it narrowed down, right? And we only have so many newspapers, far less newspapers than used to exist back in those days. Well, then we had the blogosphere, right? And everybody can blog whatever the F they wanted, and that's no longer really in existence. And now we have social media, and every lunatic can get onto social media and say and amplify their speech. It's dangerous. It's people who typically would just be your raving mad lunatics standing on their block, and everybody be saying, shut up, it's 2 a.m., I got to go to sleep. And a few people might listen to them. Today they have a whole platform with 50 million listeners, and people are dumbing down. But I do believe in humanity figuring out those things, which is it will take us a few years to kind of narrow it down to those trustworthy sources, who those people are who will be more trustworthy and more decent materials that we can get from and understand and read, right? And there will always be your lunatic publishing some pamphlet saying we faked the moon landing or whatever it is, right? Like, fine, whatever. But we'll recognize that more and more, I think, as time goes along, as these systems figure themselves out. So I have more faith in humanity than most people have. I do think there's a proliferation of stupid speech. Right, I saw this speaker the other day, some cleric of some sort, talking about like democracy's for the people, by the people. Yeah, it's a wonderful institution, but the people are stupid. Right?
So back to anonymity here.
Yeah.
Can we make any progress on actually clamping down on the problems that come with anonymity?
Well, so
without encroaching on it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is where does anonymity cross the line? That's the bigger question, right? I have a right to be anonymous and not tell people who I am. You don't get to check my ID when I walk through the door, right, of any place or walking down the street. A law enforcement can't walk up to you and go, give me your ID. We're not living in Russia in communist times. So you can't do that on the internet. I mean, a company can create their own policy if they wanted to, right? Twitter can do, or X can do that. But they would recognize the fallout of that, right? So I think that's a business-related purpose. The question is, what are you doing? I can unmask you as a district attorney. I can unmask you if you're committing crime, right? So if you threaten me with my life, I can unmask you. I can figure out who you are pretty quickly.
How?
Well, every data company that you might be using has data on you, right? So take any platform, whatever platform you want. Snapchat. Okay. You log on to your Snapchat. Does Snapchat have your IP address of where you just logged on from? There we go. Now I know where you are.
But is that really an effective approach here when perhaps people are unaware of that and you're relying on something that is suboptimal to track people rather than actually institutionalizing something?
No. You're right. I hear your point, but I'm saying the point is if you're just engaged in stupidity, I as an individual have a right to ignore or listen to your stupidity. That's my right, unfortunately. Right? Unfortunately, there's people who will listen, and that's unfortunate. Hopefully, the way to the Justice Brandeis, one of the greatest Supreme Court justices in American history, is like the way to rectify speech is by allowing more. It's not by suppressing it.
Yeah.
And so it's that sort of idea. We'll hopefully figure it out. People will see the truth. People will learn and understand for themselves. But when you cross the line within your anonymity, there's a line that you cross where government now gets involved, then I could get involved. And we get plenty of online extortion, sextortion, criminal threats, right? Bomb threats, whatever they may be. The moment you do that, you cross that line of you have a right to just exist as whatever stupid moron you want to be, but now you cross the line of harm to society. I can get you fast.
You can get me fast with something like an IP address, but what I'm trying to find out is an actual hard line in the sand where you're going, okay, so it should be the case that any platform has to have access to your IP address. Now, it just so happens at the moment that is the case, right? And that's helpful for you guys prosecuting.
No, I don't think
it could also be the case that platforms don't have access to your IP address. They don't have any form of ID because we don't want to encroach on anonymity. Right. And now suddenly you don't have any way of catching these criminals.
So let's slow down. I don't think what you're saying is completely accurate.
Okay,
even without physical ID of you, the platforms are always going to collect data of certain points. Mm-hmm. And that's necessary for the basic operation of their business. If you don't give an IP address, you can't log on. There's methods, and the government's not going to restrict that. These businesses have to operate with that information. The value of any information, anonymous or otherwise, of any individual is a marketing value, right? And then there's a huge value in information, whether it's not unmasked or masked. There's value in that information. Media companies are utilizing that information to see trends, for marketing schemes, for sales, for product building, for whatever it is. There's a multi-trillion-dollar operation in that. We will know you in some way or another. There's always traces of a human being existing, no matter how anonymous. And so the question is, to what extent should the government be able to get involved in your life? I shouldn't be involved in your life. Now, so there's two parts. It's like, should the media companies themselves, private businesses, engage in their own regulation? Separate question. Should the government engage in their own regulation? That's a different question. Government should only get involved in regulation when you commit a crime, right? And that sort of regulation.
I don't think that's the question. Okay. And I want to close this loop out.
Okay.
The question is, what happens in a world when we're progressing forwards with technology where people are all using VPNs? They, for whatever reason, don't have to give their IP address to companies, or that IP address won't be given to companies. So they're anonymous, don't have IP address.
It's always traceable.
What if it's not?
Okay,
because then they have what you are saying, which is the right to anonymity and complete anonymity.
No. When I say, sorry, let me correct, because we're talking a little. When I say you have a right to anonymity, it's to the government. Government regulation, right? Passage of laws that government regulates your anonymity is separate from your right to anonymity. You don't have a right to anonymity if you walk into my house. Who are you? What are you doing here? Right? Like, I'm going to find that out. The government regulating your anonymity, that's a different story. So if there was a way that you can be totally anonymous on a platform and the platform allows you to exist in that way, that's the world we're talking about, then what would be the responsibilities of any party? Does that make sense? I think that's what you're asking, right?
That is what I'm asking.
Then it's a social media issue, right? It's a company issue. If that really existed, if that is, because I haven't seen that quite clearly yet, the absolute anonymity of an individual on a platform.
Yeah.
Because there is methods to trace anything, because eventually your device tracks to a router, and a router gives up an informant piece of it. It has to exist, right? And so you can mail a letter from any mailbox in the world you want, but I know where that mail was mailed from, and I can trace certain information back. It's like you have to give up an IP, and I can get your MAC IP, which is IP of your device, to that. And there's various steps you can go along the line. In the hypothetical world where there's absolute anonymity and we have no idea who did what, then that's a more institutional issue for how businesses will handle that before we can even think about that. Then we, I mean the government, think about that. Because the business is just going to say we have nothing on you. End of the road, right? So if there's a mass commission of a crime and we can't track, I mean, it actually does happen in some ways, right? There are masking of IP addresses on, let's say, dark web where we don't find the child pornography. I mean, it does happen in that sense, but to the large extent, it doesn't.
The production of this video is made possible by gear from DFI Rentals. Book your next film equipment instantly at dfirentals.com. So let's keep going with this AI topic and the efficiency that comes with AI. What if we now take it from the efficiency for the criminals to produce more criminal footage or contraband to the efficiency of law and justice and enforcing it? Something like having certain stereotypes and profiles of people that are likely to commit crimes. How do we manage the use of AI without overstepping people's rights and going, hey, Elliot, you're a Brit who's 20 coming to America. That gives you a 95% chance of committing X crime, perhaps speeding because you Brits are really bad at driving. You could then maybe and reasonably use that as an argument for you to knock on my door in America and arrest me under suspicion of speeding.
That's horrifying.
Where's the line there with efficiency and using AI as a tool to predict potential criminals and not overstepping the market?
Yeah, it's a real question because predictive modeling is generally a big issue. The ACLU, the EFF, the Electronic Freedom Frontier, which are like, very, for lack of a better word, maybe anti-government organizations. I don't mean that in a negative. But anti-government organizations are very concerned with the idea of profiling. And certainly, that's where law comes into real force, right? Like, is there certain rational predictive modeling that law enforcement should engage in? Yes, but what you're asking is so complex, I can't possibly answer because it's a policy question. But here's what I tell you. It's like we have predictive modeling in the sense like this. If law enforcement is operating a certain district, a certain jurisdiction, to use predictive modeling to figure out where crime rates are most likely to occur and therefore to have more patrol vehicles in the areas where crime rates are to occur versus not wasting resources, right? Yeah. Like I live in a neighborhood. It's like if you put a bunch of patrol cars on my street, I'd be in heaven, man. I'd be so happy. But it really would be a waste of law enforcement time. So you use predictive modeling in that sense. But to start predicting future crimes, like a Minority Report with Tom Cruise, if you've ever seen that movie,
no.
Oh, it's all about predictive modeling. It's a great movie. Is terrifying, and that's why we do have a robust constitution, right? The right of the people to be secure against unreasonable search and seizures is the Fourth Amendment, and that would not permit it, right? That would just not permit it. So I might have let's say theoretically, in a nefarious sort of scenario, okay? We see you coming in from the airport and we go, this person's going to be a problem. I could trail you, right? And wait till you commit a crime and then arrest you. But like, I couldn't do anything beyond that. I couldn't just knock on your door and pre-arrest because there's no basis for that. The Constitution doesn't allow that. And we have protections in place for that, right? There are legal protections in place that do exist for that in the United States. In my knowledge of this area, right? Like there really is. I'm not worried about that as an actuality. I am worried about the idea of predictive modeling in the sense that maybe it tends to lean into what might be racial stereotypes or racist sort of behavior. And that's where we really have to be very careful about that. And also to allow the human being to be a human being, which is unpredictable, which is sometimes selfish, sometimes evil, sometimes good, sometimes, enlightened, for every single type of human being that might exist, right? We always say good people can do bad things and bad people do good things, right? Like that's a true statement. And so no, let the human being be the human being.
Half of Americans use facial recognition to access their electronic devices.
Yeah. Awesome.
How does that play out with you and your work at the DA?
So it's a great question. It's an area of research extensively. We can go for 10 hours on this topic. But here's the thing, is facial recognition is pitched by the providers, the companies, the organizations as being the most robust security that you can possibly have, because it really is, right? It takes certain biometric information and makes sure that it's the correct individual logging into a device. The positive for law enforcement that I think has been frustrating companies is that now I have easy access to your device. I think companies are frustrated with that. Okay, so your device is far more secure by facial recognition than it is with a password. Because the password I can guess, I can figure out, I can hack. Facial recognition is more of a personalized thing to you.
Can we get really nerdy about this
and
actually speak about how facial recognition works and why a criminal can't just pull up a picture from me on Instagram and hold it up to my phone to unlock it?
Okay, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a tech. So I can't get nerdy on that, how it actually works. Okay, that's the truth. That I can't. If there's specific areas. But what I would say is that let's just presume it's strong and it's hard and people can't just hold up a picture, and it takes certain points on your face and certain features. Like I switched glasses, my biometric still recognizes me. And that's really awesome. That's really cool. And they're making it more and more robust. But here's the thing. If I'm a cop and I go out and arrest you, right, and you have a phone on you and I want to access your phone, you can tell me, I don't know the password. I'm not going to give you the password. What you can't do is deny the fact that I held it up to your face and it unlocked. That's huge. That makes it so much easier for us to access your phone. It really does, right? Like beforehand, we'd get these phones with device, with encryption, with whatever it is, and we can't figure out the password. We're trying to brute force. We're trying to access your device through whatever software. And now I can just go, boom, it's yours. So it's great for us. It's wonderful. There's issues with that. There's a lot of court cases with that idea itself. Just so you know, the Supreme Court's going to have to decide this sooner or later, but there's legitimate issues.
Well, should you have, just like you do the right to remain silent and not give your code to your phone, the right to avoid showing your face to it?
Phenomenal question. That is a question that courts have asked throughout the country, but that is a very astute question for a non-lawyer. The Fourth Amendment prohibits me from unreasonable search and seizures, okay? Hypothetically, you commit a criminal act. Let's take us through it. In brief, hypothetically, you commit a criminal act. I'm going to charge you with robbery, okay? So you committed a criminal act and I'm investigating you. I come, I grab you, I grab your device. Now, I get a warrant. I get a warrant to search your home. So the Constitution says, and no warrant shall be issued, but upon probable cause, specifically defining. Okay, so I get a warrant. It's legal. I know you. I have probable cause to believe you committed the crime. I have probable cause to believe you have evidence of the crime on your phone. Am I allowed to search your phone? Yeah, I have a search warrant, right? Okay, now I can't practically search it because it's biometric. So now, but I'm allowed to, right? Me say I'm allowed to search that thing any way I can. The question you're getting into is now a Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment says no person shall be compelled to be a witness against themselves. It's not an issue of whether I can search. I could search your phone. The question is whether I'm compelling you to incriminate yourself. And that's a big question. Am I compelling you, and are you incriminating yourself by unlocking a device for me? Big legal question that's going on. I think the answer is no.
Why?
How did you incriminate yourself? The thing on your phone is what's incriminating. It's not your phone. I mean, say, I'm not forcing you to do anything. It is or isn't, practically speaking, your device. That's the issue, right? So, for example, I'll give you a more physical, robust example. Criminal, we find a shirt at a scene of a murder that we believe the criminal left behind. Can I force you to put that on?
No.
Of course I can. Why not? It's not telling me anything that's in your mind. You're not being a witness. It is what it is. It's a physical fact. It is or isn't. It's not from your mind. Compelling you to be a witness against yourself is testimony.
Could you force me to put anything on?
Sure. All the time. I can force you to take a haircut. I can take your DNA. Let's take that as an example. Can I force you to give me your DNA? I have a murder that happens. There's DNA on the weapon. I need your DNA. Can I force you to give me your DNA? The answer is yes, because it's not revealing any information that we might call a witness. Testimonial. It's not testimonial. Testimonial is information in your head. It's not that. It is what it is. It's a factual fact. It's a fact. It's a factual analysis. Are you this? It's like, can you measure me? How tall I am? Yeah, of course I can measure you. It's a fact, whether one way or not. Your DNA is a fact. Your physical size is a fact. In courts where gang members have tattoos all over themselves and you want to illustrate to the jury back in the old days, you want to illustrate to the jury some of their tattoos to show them that this is, you can make them take their shirt off in the middle of court. If I need a lineup, you've seen lineups, right? Visual lineups in court. I can make you be part of a lineup. You go, well, that's my Fifth Amendment right. No, it's not. Those are cases that have been well established. So that sort of idea, it's the same kind of thing to sit there and say, you of yourself, if not revealing any information, but a physical component of yourself, without you having to reveal information that's stored that is not compelling you to be testifying against yourself. So that's a very, very astute question and area. Very complex. It's all over the place, all over the United States. There are courts who agree with what you just said. Few, but there are courts that agree that is compelling testimony. Most courts disagree. The bigger question is, can I force you to enter your password in a phone? That's another question.
I want us to speak about surveillance.
Yes.
And the protection of society that comes from surveillance.
Yes.
Where does the line sit there? Should we be pushing for a CCP model where you have social credit linked to every action and you have cameras on every corner? I can't remember the statistic about how many cameras they have per person. Perhaps you'll know, but it's shocking.
Right.
And it's terrifying. Then at the other end of the spectrum, you have New York City in the 1970s where, I mean, you see a movie like Joker inspired by that, and he goes and kills a bunch of dudes on a train with no cameras and then runs off. Obviously, that's fiction, but it conveys the idea here. How do we go forwards utilizing ever more, first of all, high quality cameras that you can punch in on and identify people from, but also the technology that comes downstream from that, which is identifying individuals with AI and other cues built up from this network of cameras?
It's such a hard question. I honestly don't know the answer. Because here's the hard question of it. I always tell my students the same thing, which is my generation had far more privacy than yours does. But not because the government necessarily, because you guys, right? I know everything about you. The vast majority of individuals of your generation online, I know everything about you constantly. There's so much information that you put out there on a regular basis. So yeah, we should be deeply concerned about government surveillance. I really like the idea of being able to be an idiot in my own private time. Right? Like I do tell my students, like here's a question. I ask my students all the time. If I give you an option and I'm going to search one thing and the other thing I can't, so you're going to choose which one I'm going to search, and you can prohibit me from searching one. Okay, so which one will you prohibit? I'm going to search your home, your entire home, or your phone. Which one do you prohibit me from searching?
Definitely the phone.
Yeah, 100% of your generation says that, except one jackass who always tries to throw off my statistics. Right? It's always. But why? I always say, like, in the history of human beings, in all of human history, 100% of humanity would have said my home until 15 years ago. That's a monumental shift of human perspective, right? That entire civilizations would have said, my home is my most sacrosanct area. It's my castle. It's most private. You shall not ever enter. William Pitt, the Jr., gave a great speech in the 1500s in England on the parliamentary floor, talking about how it's a great quote about how I may live in a ruined tenement. The wind may enter, the rain may enter, but all the king's forces shall not pass upon the threshold. This idea that the government cannot enter your home ever unless it's really appropriate, right? There are places for it. And my home is so important to me. And today it's like, whatever. What are you going to find? My underwear? Don't search my phone. Everybody will say that. Don't search my phone. And it's not because I suspect you. of having illegal information on your phone. It's not because I suspect you of being a bad human being. It's just that in the privacy of our own existences, we engage differently in different manners, in different portions, whatever that may be, whether it's a medical illness that you don't share with anybody, whether it's a personal relationship that you don't share with anybody, whether it's just maybe talking with your fellas and you talk like a moron sometimes. There's a place for that to exist. Sorry, we're off on a tangent a little bit, but I asked my students, my generation, what do you think the greatest fear of my generation, like tangible fear was? Not like being drowned or hung, but I'm talking about tangible fear, something we feared to do. Statistically, we feared public speaking. That was my generation. That was statistics. You can look it up, that people feared public speaking. Your generation doesn't. You're all used to public speaking. Everybody's just doing a vlog, right? It's not that. What's your biggest fear? Your biggest fear is being canceled, right? It's someone finding out too much about you. And that's a dangerous ideology. Forget the government for a second. It's dangerous for a social value, which is there is a place to be an absolute idiot sometimes. There is a place for human beings to make mistakes and rectify them. There is a place to learn, right? I've done this throughout my career as a prosecutor where there's crimes that occur that they're really rectifiable. I recognize that. And I think it's important we give people the opportunity to rectify that. There are crimes that are unrectifiable, right? And so I always, one of the things I like to talk about is this idea of like, if we were sitting in class today and there's a person sitting next to you and he's a bit of an older student, and during a break, you look at this guy and you say, hey man, you're like 30 years old. What are you doing in an undergraduate class at University of Southern California? And he goes, well, funny you should ask. I was a juvenile delinquent. And as a juvenile, I committed a murder. And I spent 15 years in jail, juvenile hall, and I just got out. I've reformed my life. I've taken classes. And I really want to get a degree and an education and really live a good life. You'd be like, wow, that's admirable. Wow, that's amazing. Same guy sitting next to you, and one of your neighbors leans over and says, that guy put the N-word on social media 15 years ago. You're like, oh my God, what a racist. One guy took a life. One guy posted a horrible racist thing on social media. That's terrible. Hopefully he learned from that. But one guy took a life. Like, it's unforgivable. We should have a place to forgive you, or not forgive you, but to allow you to re-enter society. It's not my position to forgive you. It's an unforgivable crime.
There's an important distinction here with forgiveness of crimes that have occurred and what you're saying. And I don't want to extrapolate here too much, so push back on me if I get this wrong. But linking this back to the surveillance point of always being surveilled and the government can tell if you're committing a crime or not, is it that you're saying that you should have privacy to commit crimes and not be detected? Because right now, I'm not seeing a problem with having surveillance everywhere, because if you're committing a crime, you should be punished for that.
Right. So what I'm talking about, you're right. I agree with you. Although I do like to sometimes speed or, roll through a stop sign, right? Imagine nothing we ever did was unsurveillable.
And by the way, this is obvious to anyone watching and listening. Yeah. I would fucking hate to live in this place. I speed all the time, whatever. But if we're going super quantifiable, the law is the gospel mode here, there doesn't seem to be any strong argument against having surveillance everywhere.
So you're right. So you're very good point to be making, which is I'm distinguishing between non-criminal behavior, stupid behavior, versus crime. I'm not advocating that the government shouldn't be able to surveil crime. I'm arguing that we do so many dumb things in any given day amongst each other, and that, yes, there is a place for that to exist. And if we're in constant surveillance, like I said, going back, your fears of being canceled, right, means say, we shouldn't have to live with that fear. We should behave appropriately.
But you don't have to live with this fear, because the surveillance only gets triggered and sent to the government if you commit a crime.
There's no security on that, right? Imagine the amount of leaks we have of anything that exists, that anybody can access. And like those things that come out, you just sit there and go, imagine the most stupid thing you've ever done with your friends, humiliating thing in your life. Imagine that was capable of coming out. Should we have to live under the fear of that? Like, there's a statute of limitations for crimes, most crimes, right? Like that if you committed a robbery, 3 years go by, we didn't solve the case, it's gone, we can't prosecute you ever. Well, you committed a terrible crime, sure. Depends on the nature. There's no statute of limitations for murder or rape. But there has to be a certain level of human ability to exist and move on from past behaviors. And that's the worry of it, right? Like, yes, theoretically, in a theoretical world, but we enter 1984 very quickly.
Well, I agree with you that it's an implementation problem. And I
But,
guess,
as a prosecutor, I will say, like, the more video there is, the better for me, right? Like, I'm separating the libertarian of me versus the government employee of me.
certainly. And I think it's fascinating to drill down into your psychology and especially the sort of intergenerational dynamic here, because as someone who has grown up chronically online, I'm kind of indifferent to the idea of an AI camera constantly following me around, and as long as I don't commit any crimes, it won't log all the other private stuff. My only problem there is the fact that I do speed sometimes and I would get fucked for it. But in terms of the actual ability to commit stupid legal actions, I don't really care. Whereas it seems like you do psychologically on some level.
Yeah. So, first of all, I mean, in terms of the crime, the speeding, right? We would adjust our behaviors very quickly, and we'd make society safer, right? That's the truth. We would adjust our behavior, right? We do speed chronically, and all of a sudden we'll be like, all right, 5 tickets in a row, you're going to stop speeding, right? Like, we're decent people are susceptible to changing behaviors, but I do worry about mass oversight. I do worry about the way we judge. Like, we've jumped from topic to topic, and in a way, you're going back to that. It's like, people could do anonymously to you, right? The cancelization, the destruction of you as a human being for being a dumbass at one point in your life. That's what worries me. I really want the ability, like the freedom of people to think, to act, to engage with one another in various ways, as we should. It's good for human beings. It's what separates us from other creatures, is that we do make mistakes and we do correct those mistakes, and no one's perfect and we're always going to make mistakes. The flip side I worry about is surveillance by unfeeling, unemotional groups, which is government and mass and media, right? Like, I don't want Google knowing everything about me, and I don't want the government knowing everything about me for the sake of just privacy. And you might sit there and say, I'm not worried, but it is worrisome. At some point, it does become worrisome, and you might get a social crime. And I don't think the CCP is great. That's terrible, right? That we should have that. But you quickly approach a world like that. Now the flip side is, let's look at the practicality of it. The practicality of it all is we understand that when we're in public, we're constantly surveilled, because everybody's got a phone and everybody's recording and everybody's whatever. And we come to that social agreement with one another, I think, where we understand that I'm not offended if you're standing outside with your phone recording and I happen to walk past.
Yeah.
Right? We understand it. 100 years ago, the idea of taking a picture of someone was horrendous without consent. There's literally cases on the subject talking about, like, they took my photo, right? You're like, today you'd be like, so what, right? So there is a differing evolution of how we engage and how we are. Your generation appreciates privacy far less than mine in some ways, but you still would want to have the freedom to exist, the freedom to eat where you wanted, to have a conversation without being constantly overheard, right? There's that. That's like fundamental to human beings just existing and being able to breathe and being able to live.
But we've made a leap here from privacy to freedom, whereas I feel, and sorry to push you on this,
no,
but
it's
I
fine.
think it's important.
Go nuts.
I just don't see an argument that's been compelling for privacy for privacy's sake. And I've been to, I've been to panels and
is privacy not a value? I'm asking that, like, fundamentally. It's great. We came full circle to this whole conversation. It's not a value? Like, fundamentally as an idea, is it not a value? Easy. Did you go to Christian school at all as a kid?
No.
Did you read any Bible stories?
No.
Do you know who Adam and Eve are?
I do indeed.
Okay, we know who Adam and Eve are, right? And Adam and Eve, they're created by God in the Garden of Eden. What's the first thing that they do? Eve eats from the tree of knowledge, right? You know that?
Yeah.
The snake compels her to eat from, or tells her to eat from tree of knowledge, and they eat from this tree, and she shares it with Adam, and what happens to them? God starts looking for them. God's like, what the fuck did you just do, right? And he's looking, by the way, I'm an ordained rabbi. Okay, so God's like, what's going on, right? And he said, like the Bible writes, like in the actual text is like, God's like, where are you, Adam? And Adam and Eve are ashamed, and they immediately cover themselves up. And you're like, wait, what does that mean? You mean you're ashamed? They were walking around naked before, and all of a sudden now they're ashamed and they wear loincloths. And God's asking, where are you? It's an idea of visual privacy. We understand instinctively the moment they get knowledge of their own physical limitations, of their own humanity, the first thing that happens, that when human beings become self-aware, they're not living like angels in an Eden. They're living as human beings. They become self-aware. And shame and privacy, the desire for privacy is immediately there. And God respects that. And God's therefore, again, if we believe in the biblical story, but if we're following that stream of consciousness, we're going, God knows where they are. But God's respecting, like, where are you? Giving the respect, knocking on a front door. I know where you are, but I'm knocking on your front door. And Adam and Eve are embarrassed of themselves and they cover up their private parts. The idea of privacy, I think what it's telling us biblically, but moving on, is there is a value to just basic fundamental value to the idea of privacy. Interestingly, side note, to fast forward to the United States, there's no word privacy in our Constitution at all. It doesn't mention the word privacy. In England, they have the word privacy in your Constitution. In the United States, there is no Constitution that says the word privacy in it. Actually, local constitutions, California Constitution has privacy. But like the United States Constitution does have it, it implies that. It's not an absolute, but it exists to the extent that it should, to the extent the government should have a right to take it away from you. So I have the right to have my own home and to do whatever I want in my home. But if you're committing a crime, the government can get a warrant to bust in my house. So I do have the right to privacy, right? But the right to privacy, we extrapolate into the right to gay marriage, right? Transgender issues, maybe abortion, right? Those very hot topic social issues are all based on a privacy concern, which is government, it's none of your business who I choose to marry. That's privacy, right? It's none of your business if I decide to eat meat or eat vegan food or drink a large soda or a small soda. It's a basic idea of privacy, right? The idea to exist. So I do think privacy is a fundamental idea. And by the way, not just me, but like the UN Declaration of Human Rights recognizes privacy. A lot of countries recognize it explicitly.
Well, it seems like there's this inextricable link between privacy and freedom that constantly overlaps. I guess I'm just workshopping here whether that can be severed and whether now, for the first time in history, the ability to use AI and sidestep humans, you can be monitored for everything. And the AI, it's not this conscious, sentient thing.
Right. It will be, I think. I don't know.
I don't think so. I don't know how we make that jump to a conscious AI.
Hey, man, I never figured out the iPhone, right? Like, so I'm saying it blew my mind. I don't know what could come down the road. But yeah, I hear what you're saying.
But the point being that it kind of depends on your definition of privacy and if privacy is specifically linked to another human observing you, right? Because if it is a machine that's observing you,
no,
I don't know if that is an infringement.
Let me ask you a simple question. Sorry, and again, I interrupt, but I'm moving quickly. If you're at home by yourself, okay, this is a generalized question, not specific to you. If you're at home by yourself, no one's in your apartment, and you go to the bathroom, do you close the door?
No.
Go number 2.
No.
No?
No.
You're a weirdo. Okay, most people, the answer would be yes.
I explicitly keep it open for the freedom of being able to keep it open.
But I think most people would close the door instinctively. It's a desire.
I think that's human error, and that's or not error. That's harsh, but it's human emotion and habit rather than any actual logical grounding.
It's reflecting a desire for privacy and on a very base form. The most private thing any human being does in any given day is go to the bathroom. You would always close it if someone else was there, not because you have concern for the smell in another individual, concern for yourself. I think that is a privacy thing, right? There's times when we just want to close the door and not be monitored. I think that is a fundamental human concept. Sorry, so to interrupt you,
I agree that probably certainly is the case, and we naturally feel this instinct for privacy. Does that necessitate that things should stay as they are and that we shouldn't have our privacy encroached upon? I mean, no, it doesn't mean that.
But I really do love the idea of what you're discussing, because the separation of freedom and privacy, and I've never thought of it in those terminologies, but I do think that they're like offhand, right? Again, workshopping, I think that they're synonymous. They have a certain synonymousness to us. You're not free if you're not private.
I guess, okay, let's like really draw this out here.
Yeah.
Laws are decided upon to partly guide society towards flourishing. Can you give me perhaps a better take on the laws?
No, I guess maybe I have a very I'm not a libertarian, surprisingly, but I do have a libertarian view on it. I think that the baseline of the purpose of government is to protect us.
Yeah. Okay, so we have that in place.
Right.
Protection of law. Now, imagine a future where everyone goes and they take a shit in their own house and they've got a Ring doorbell camera watching them.
Right.
They've got one in every room in
Right.
the corner. That camera, it's not going to send that data anywhere. It's just being stored for a couple of seconds and then it gets deleted immediately if a crime wasn't committed. If a burglar didn't jump through the window behind you whilst you're taking your shit and violently rob you, then run away. So in a sense of privacy, you're not having your privacy encroached upon by a human. It's just this AI machine. Now, I hear what you're saying about humans wanting to close the door, even if they're at home by themselves. I'm probably a weirdo for not doing that, right? That's our instinct that's developed. But just play it forwards 3 generations of people taking shits with Ring doorbell cameras. You're probably just going to get used to that. And then looping back to laws protecting your society, that's a much stronger society and safer society.
It's a much more regulated society too. I mean, I hear you. Again, we're talking in such abstract theoretical, right?
I don't know if we are, though.
I think
this
we
is the
are.
direction that
Because
we're going.
if government were to say something like that, I'd be appalled. I think most people would be. Like, I don't see a form of government that isn't fascist that can impose that. What you're saying, right? It's very utopian. Like, if we're coming from a place like strictly for this, like, every single thing we do is to protect human beings, and therefore it does not matter what, right? We are going to be on top of you and we're going to watch everything you do. Then in that like scenario with the utter altruism of government and no nefarious forces at play, etc., then maybe there's a point to be made, but it's not. It doesn't exist, and I don't think anybody could ever implement that. The moment you have like those sort of things, I'm trying to think of a more concrete example that we're talking about today. Here, maybe this is helpful. I don't know, to maybe extrapolate my position. Google collects data points on you. Every single thing you do. Every single thing you do. It's collecting data points. They store it in something called the sensor vault. Okay, so Google has the sensor vault, which you have an Android, or if you have an iPhone, but Android for sure, everything you do on Android. You have an iPhone, you have Gmail, right? Or you have other apps that Google owns or third-party apps that they control. Every time you log on to one of those apps, you're sending a location. Google collects that location. More than numbers than I can count. I don't know numbers past quintillion, right? They have more data points than that, I think. It's all electronically generated and motivated. Now, I have a murder. I've had this multiple times. I have a murder scene. Here's a location of a murder scene. And murder happened 2 a.m. I find a dead body here. I don't know who was there. I don't know what's going on. What do? I go to Google. I give them a longitude, latitude, 4 points, whatever shape I want, small area. And I say during this time period, from let's say 1:30, I found the body at 2. So I say from 1 o'clock till 3 o'clock, how many phones connected? How many devices connected in this box? Google can give me data points on how many people connected in that box. They collect that data. And then from there, we can narrow it down and figure out who may be the perpetrator and who the criminals. Real life example, we find a dead body on top of a mountain in the Hollywood Hills one night. No one knew was murdered. They collect the body, they put it in the freezer at the coroner's office for further examination. 5 days later, coroner unzips the frozen body and notices a bullet wound in the back of the guy's head. Cops go out to scene, there's nothing there. You're 5 days too late, you morons. Okay, so now we have a dead body. Who killed him? They go get a geofence. It's called a geo warrant, geofence warrant, a geolocation warrant. It takes a certain geographical location. We get a warrant and we can see what devices. One device is the victim's. So he's excluded as the murderer. There's a second device. That's it. That's probably our murderer. Now we can start tracking that individual. We then get all his text messages that he had sent in the past week before we knew it was murder. And he's texting, they haven't found the body yet, to his sister. Okay, now we know you're the murderer by the virtue of the fact you said, I did it, I killed him, but they haven't found the body yet. This is in a time before anybody knew there was a murder, right? So it's helpful for us to solving crime, but there's a lot of pushback on that. So a lot of pushback saying it's a mass surveillance, government surveillance, to the extent that, for example, ICE, I don't know how ICE is doing it, but ICE is using some version of geofence for whatever they're doing. So the California legislature recently proposed that limiting the ability of companies to collect geolocation information on you. So whatever app you have, I don't know if you have a 7-Eleven app, a Starbucks app, a Coffee Bean app, these are like local place, and you get alerts like, oh, there's whatever it is, that's a geofence. They're collecting data. It's going to limit the amount of data the companies collect on you. The worry from law enforcement, so to push back, like to give your perspective, I'm writing a memo to my legislative people in my office going, hey, this is a huge problem, because sometimes crimes aren't solved for a year. And the ability to go back a year ago and look at that data is wonderful. And so now we're pushing back saying, no, we don't want them to only collect for 5 days or a week, 2 weeks. We want to be able to them to collect indefinitely for the purposes of crime prevention. That's what ends up happening. That's the slow degradation of what would happen in your world. For me, I think it's good, but for you, it's bad. But I'm saying that's the slow degradation. It's momentarily, it's hacked, the system's viewed, right? There's so many things that can happen technologically that give fear to people in any given way, that what you're describing is abstractly perfection of society where we're all have each other's interests in mind, but doesn't actually work.
I agree. And I think pragmatically speaking here, it would never work.
But think about what I just described, right? Because I was putting it in more concrete forms. Or would you be concerned that I can take a geofence? Let's say the murder happens at 2 p.m. in Santa Monica in this area, and I can take a geofence and I get 10,000 hits. Are you concerned about that? It doesn't tell me their names. It just tells me device.
Well, yeah, I think it's such an interesting concept to entertain, but pragmatically, there's always going to be someone nefarious that misuses your data. So we can agree on that. And I want to tie a ribbon on this section and sort of move us on from that, and from the position that I was articulating and sort of workshopping. Are there any other examples of that present day that concern you? Something like the use, there's such a prevalent use of the word safety and prioritizing people's safety. What's concerning you at the moment in terms of people's privacy and inalienable rights that's masked up in compassion and protection?
Well, you just described it, right? No, I mean, I don't worry that much about it. I mean, I tend to have, even with the libertarian views I just expressed, a good trust in my government and a good trust in the democratic system and my fellow citizens. I think I do have that. And so I look at it as when my citizenry is led astray with false beliefs on certain things, like as a professional in field of criminal justice, and I see people advocating against that. Right. And you go, okay, let's have a rational conversation without name calling. Can we do that? And let's figure out what's right or wrong. That's what worries me more. Right. It's the subversion of humanity, which I hope always has a rebounded effect. I'm not that concerned yet about government surveillance. Me say, as a person who's done these geofence warrants or something called tower dumps, I can go to a cell tower nearby and take all the data off it. Right, and know every device that connected to that cell tower over any given period of time. I'm less concerned about that because I know the regulation by which we operate and how we're using it. I am more concerned, like we had discussed many times, is the social manipulation of people and the perspectives that tend to alter the physical safety of our society. That concerns me more than current government overreach. Like, government will always push the boundaries. And that's why it's really important to have a checks and balances. And I think we have a robust one, but like we saw with the NSA and what Snowden revealed, hero or hack, whatever you want to call him, that's not the issue. What he revealed to us was something significant, that the government was collecting data on us, and they shouldn't have been. That's significant. I have concern about that. But in general, I'm more concerned about Google and Amazon collecting data than I am about the government. Because we're far more regulated than they are. They collect all sorts of data on you that you have no idea about, and it's within their contractual rights. I'm more scared of them. And then I'm more scared of the manipulation of society and the way society might move along and view things and perspectives and attitudes that ultimately result in danger to my fellow beings. We had a DA at the District Attorney of Los Angeles. His name was George Gascon, who for 4 years was the District Attorney of Los Angeles. His experiment was a disaster. He was loathed by every person internally, every district attorney who worked under him. We loathe him. We find him to be a despicable person. And his social experiment resulted in the actual death of people. More people were killed. More people were robbed. More properties were burglarized. More stores were broken into because of your idiotic experiment that is factually and legally untrue. That's what worries me more. And he got elected in the largest county in the world. I mean, serious, right? We have 1,000 prosecutors in Los Angeles. 1,000. That's how big we are. New York is separated into boroughs, but just to give you an example, Brooklyn is like 350.
Yeah.
So we're humongous, and our society elected this official to destroy their society, but because they're under delusion, unfortunately. So that's what worries me more than government itself.
Well, I want to speak to you more about local issues, prosecuting, narcotics, gangs.
Yeah.
Talk to me all about Skid Row and LA and the government in the last few years. But we can do that over on Substack, along with you answering some supporters' questions that they've sent in. For
sure. I will suggest there is a guy that you have to track down to do a podcast with if you want to talk about Skid Row. His name is Officer Deon Joseph, D-E-O-N Joseph. He is the Skid Row senior lead officer for like 25 years. Humongous black dude. Wonderful guy. I think a hero, a real Superman when it comes to these things. Saved lives, but he's very hated by a lot of groups that want to regulate and he understands Skid Row and the nature of the people there. But yeah, certainly I'm more than happy to answer, but there's a great resource here in LA that is unbelievable.
Well, I'll have to go after him. I'm fascinated by Skid Row as this concept, and I've been down there filming a documentary and researching into it. So I'll press you on that on Substack.
Anytime, and I'm telling you, Deon Joseph has been he knows every single person living on Skid Row for more than 2 months knows Deon Joseph.
Wow.
He is the most prolifically well-known police officer I've ever met in my life. Every store, every business, every homeless person knows Deon Joseph. And he knows them.
Benny, where can people find more of your work?
Don't. No, I want privacy. No, okay. I'm a district attorney in LA. My specialty is cybercrime. I love doing that. I've written 2 textbooks. They're on Amazon that I just self-published. One on cyber law and one on law without borders. It's like a sampling of like copyright law and privacy and things like that. Online defamation, online copyrights, that sort of thing. And I teach at USC. I teach 2 classes there at the University of Southern California, and that's amazing. And other than that, I don't have a website or post on social media, but I love teaching. I love being a district attorney. It's the greatest.
And head on over to Substack, where Benny's going to answer your questions, and we're going to encroach on his privacy even more.
Fantastic.